or panel is called The Pacific Peace and a Secure Future for All. And I'd like to welcome Barbara Hartley to facilitate this session. Thanks, Barbara.
Thank you very much, Annette.
Can I just make one quick announcement? The court has just handed down its decision, and the march can go ahead tomorrow.
Yay! Thank you.
Repeat that into the computer.
In case of people in the computer didn't hear, Senator David Shoebridge just told us that the court in Sydney has just handed down its decision about the march over the Harbour Bridge, and they've decided that it can go ahead in spite of the cops trying to say that there was going to be a crush, right? Okay. Okay.
Well, Chris Mintz is free to apply.
And now I'm so excited that I just have to calm down a little bit. I can't think what I was going to say. Okay, it's a privilege for me to be able to be involved in this Pacific Peace Network conference. And what I would like to say, thank you, Andy, is our last three speakers, Alison's point about war powers. Honestly, what sort of a country are we when we do not? What sort of a country are we when we do not get any input into perhaps the most important decision to go to war, particularly given the nature of weapons today? David talking about coalition of grassroots groups, which is absolutely fabulous, and Rima's unstinting actions in this city in support of the people of Palestine, and all we can do is support you in every way, Rima. So thank you so much. But what I was going to say before I got so excited was that it is a great pleasure. We are here today on unceded Jagera Turrbal land, and people have for 60 millennia cared for the land. Some people can't hear. Can people hear now? The Indigenous people in this area cared for the land, the waters that we see behind us, the waters out at Kondamuka, and also I always think of the sky as well. And it's a great privilege for us to be able to gather here. We had, as I said, a fabulous introductory panel, but perhaps this panel is the focal pivot of the whole conference, because this panel is about Pacific peace and a secure future for all. And we have three amazing speakers, one of whom, dear colleagues, is online. So could everyone please cross their fingers and hope that goes ahead okay? But I would like to start by introducing Mary Tuilau. And Mary is a human rights activist, a younger woman. She's also a facilitator, a leader from Fiji. She advocates on self-determination in nuclear and ocean spaces, and she's done that over the past 7 years. She's got lived experience of engagement with Pacific youth, which is really important, regional civil society movements and political spaces, and her passion is people as stewards of the vast Pacific Ocean. So, Mary, there's a lot more here about you, but I'll leave it at that and ask you to come to the microphone, please. Thanks, Mary. Not my field.
Perfect. So, Barbara. On behalf of the Fiji veterans and nuclear families, I would like to extend our warm bula vinaka. We would like to take this time to pay our respect to the Indigenous people of this land, past, present, and emerging. I stand here with the weight of memory and the fire of responsibility with our people in West Papua, Kanaki, and our survivors all throughout the Pacific Ocean. Carrying the stories of our people, we were silent, poisoned, and displaced, yet never defeated. Long before borders, were drawn treaties and foreign weapons, our land and waters were sacred. They fed us, they healed us, and they protected us. There were over 300 hydrogen and atomic bombs that were tested in our ocean. In the time frame of 1950s, our islands became a test site of violence. Christmas Island, or Kristimati, was where the British tested hydrogen bomb. They brought nuclear fire to the belly of the Pacific, clothed in lies and masked as progress. Or how Ben Whitty in 1946 described it as for the good of mankind. Or as Henry Kissinger described it, in 1969, there are only 90,000 people out there. Who gives a damn? The nuclear detonation at Maladine and Christmas Island from 1957 to 1958 were acts of inhumanity, poisoning our land, our ocean, and our people. Over 300 Fijian soldiers and sailors were exposed to the radiation of 9 nuclear bombs. A hydrogen bomb, one hydrogen bomb with a destructive force of 1 megaton, when detonated, released energy equivalent to 1 million tons of TNT, creating a fireball hotter than the sun, instantly vaporizing everything within a radius of several kilometers. Those caught in the immediate blast are reduced to shadows, while survivors suffered from radiation burns, blindness, and acute radiation sickness. Now imagine such explosion occurring repeatedly within months all throughout the years. Our Fijian veterans who were of the age 15, 16, 17, and 18 were promised a good life for a standard pay of £1.05. With that in mind, they were taken to Christmas Island to assist what they call infrastructure, roads, bridges, ports, without knowledge that they were sent over to be test subjects. There weren't any consultation, no protection or warning for them. Today, they live with the radiation sickness. And worse, they carry the pain of seeing the effects passed down to their wives, children, and grandchildren and great-grandchildren today. The United Kingdom continued to deny responsibility. In 2010, over 1,000 veterans, including Fijians, were denied justice in the British courtroom because their pain didn't fit into colonial narratives. While we battle poisons of the past, we are confronted with the continuous genocide of West Papua. Since Indonesia's illegal occupations in 1963, over 500,000 Papuans have been killed. These are not isolated cases. These are patterns. These are state violence. Last month alone, the Pacific news outlet reported 8 refugees died and 2 recent incidents, one in Tenma village and another in Eastern Jaya. Papuans were killed. while going through my speech, I was wondering what could Australia or what could Australia do or continue to do? There were four things that came into mind, which our Pacific brothers and sisters firmly stands on. One was to ratify and act on the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, and which outlined the Article 6 and 7 on victim assistance, environmental remediation, and international cooperation and assistance. Two, demand a UN human rights fact-finding mission in West Papua stand on the side of life, dignity, and freedom. Three, support decolonization in West Papua, Kanaki, and the rest of the Pacific and international that's still under occupation, and use platforms such as Pacific Island Forum Leaders, MSG, Melanesian Spearhead Group, C24, UNGA, to push for a free and self-determining countries. Fourth, demilitarize Australia's Pacific strategy, stop expanding foreign military base in the region. Don't turn our scarred ocean into a war zone. As large ocean nation with essential wisdom that predates the weapons, the treaties, and the borders, we carry stories older than any constitution, and we breathe the spirit of resistance, resilience, and revival. Let us not allow our silence to be mistaken for acceptance. Let us not inherit injustice without fighting to transform it. And to end my speech, I would like to share a poem by Louisa Tuilau. The US tested a series of nuclear bombs in the Pacific Ocean, Marshall Islands being one of it. And one of the series, it was named Bravo. And Louisa Tuilau, who is my twin sister, did a reflective poem. And I would like to end with this poem. Thank you. I walk Bravo. My skin is sun-kissed, but my body is Bravo. Bravo, that's what the outsiders say for well done. The Italian thinks it means brave. But you know what I think? Bravo is a cell injected in my body about to explode. Bravo is a substance reaction that made my boom blind. Bravo is a deliberate performance in the sky. I calculated invisible to camouflage the visible. Burn tears, burn dry. Bravo is my siblings born a defect machine. Bravo is the gene I pass. A replicate of a poisonous culture. But you know, my island a castle before Bravo.
Thank you so much, Mary. That's absolutely brilliant. So signing the TPNW independent, completely independent fact-finding mission into West Papua, supporting decolonisation throughout the Pacific where it still exists, Kanaki, West Papua, places like that. And I'm really interested in your last point, which is aligning with Pacific organisations and finding out what Pacific people are thinking and doing and acting upon, and us supporting that as allies. So that was absolutely brilliant. Could we give Mary another round of applause? Thanks. And All right, okay. But Annette has suggested that we have 1 minute of silence for the victims of the Castle Bravo tests. Perhaps we could expand that. The 6th of August is Hiroshima Day. The 9th of August is Nagasaki Day. We have bombs raining down on people now, right now in Palestine and other places, and perhaps we could think of all victims of nuclear testing and civilian bombing generally. So let's do that for 1 minute, everyone. Thanks very much, everyone. Our second speaker, and Winifred's here to do the IT, I think, is a wonderful gentleman called Ralph Regenvanu. Ralph is actually Vanuatu's Minister for Climate Change, Adaptation, Energy and Environment. He's serving his 6th term as a Member of Parliament for Vanuatu's capital, and largest city, Port Vila. He's a background in cultural heritage management, and he served as the director of the National Museum of Vanuatu. He was also a founding board member of the Pacific Island Museums Association. He's a fearless and ongoing advocate for climate change, and it's in that capacity that we welcome him here today. So I'll just hand over to Winifred, everyone, to do the IT. Thanks.
Thank you. So we're just going to unpin ourselves and hopefully pin you, Ralph. So here we go.
Hi, can you hear me?
Oh, yes. We can't see you yet, but we're looking for you online. Is it? Oh, right at the top. Yeah, we'll unpin ourselves. Let's do that first. Okay, if you could speak again, very good. Thank you.
Okay, well, greetings everyone from Vanuatu,
Great.
from the island of Tanna, in fact, down south of Vanuatu. I'm here for we're holding our National Arts and Culture Festival beginning on Monday for a week. And I'm here for that. And we've got people coming from all over the 80 islands of Vanuatu to come together and celebrate our cultural heritage and also try and review and define our way forward as a nation. And this is something we try to do regularly, try to draw upon Indigenous knowledge, our cultural heritage, our history, to determine the future for our country. So I'm here. I'm greetings to all. I'd like to thank the conference organizers for having me. This time last week, in fact, I was coming back to The Hague, where Vanuatu led an initiative to get an advisory from the International Court of Justice on states' obligations with respect to climate change. And this was a great victory for climate action. We actually got JAID to declare that it's in fact a legal obligation of states to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions immediately. That things such as licensing the continuing production of fossil fuels, continuing to subsidize fossil fuels, the ICJ defined it as an internationally wrongful act. And the ICJ also said that states that have caused harm to countries like Vanuatu and other climate vulnerable states have a duty to restitute us for the harm that they've caused. So this was a great thing for climate vulnerable states to get this, because we are searching for any possible way to get the world to address what is our greatest security issue, which is climate change. And I just want to refer to the 2018 Boy Declaration, which is the Pacific Islands Forum statement on security that was made in Nauru in 2018. And I was actually Foreign Minister of Vanuatu there when we made this statement. And I just want to read out the most powerful statement to come out of that was the first point in that declaration, which said, recognizing the need to strengthen regional security cooperation and collective action through the assertion of our will and the voices of our Pacific peoples, we hereby declare that we reaffirm that climate change remains the single greatest threat to the livelihoods, security, and well-being of the peoples of the Pacific. So I just want to say that because for us, this geopolitical competition we're seeing in the region, and what we've been hearing from the speakers today about Australia's part in that militarization, for us, that is such a dangerous distraction from what is really what our security need. And our security need is for climate change to be addressed. And unfortunately, the increasing militarization of the Pacific is just distracting and diverting and actually taking precious resources away from addressing our problem, which is the development needs of our people. And for many countries in the Pacific, particularly the low-lying countries like Kiribati and Tuvalu, the existential threat of completely disappearing under the waves as a result of climate change. And so this is why in Vanuatu, for example, we don't have an army or like most Pacific Island countries. And we are trying to resist the continuing pressure from Australia and other countries to align ourselves in this geopolitical standoff between the US and China. And of course, we know that there's a lot of paranoia of China in the US rhetoric, and which extends to Australia. And it's a delicate balance we have to play, and we continue to play it. Vanuatu, ever since we became independent in 1980, has been a member of the non-aligned movement, and we treasure our membership of the non-aligned movement because we have a conscious decision not to ourselves in this great power rivalry that we're seeing emerging again in the Pacific. But just to assert that for us, it becomes an issue of, we became independent in 1980. All the Pacific Island countries were the last countries in the world, last region of the world to become politically independent. And we still have, as we heard the previous speaker, Mere, say, we still have the greatest number of colonies in the Pacific than any other region in the world. There are more colonies still in the Pacific than there are in Africa or anywhere, or in Asia, anywhere. So we have colonies of the US, we have colonies of France, we have colonies of Indonesia. In terms of state violence being perpetrated in the Pacific, we have the two greatest examples being West Papua and Kanaki. We just saw what happened in New Caledonia recently with the crisis. Both colonies. And while we try to address the development needs of our people, there's a famous quote by our leader of independence, Father Walter Lini, which says, Vanuatu cannot be free until the rest of the Pacific is free. And that's a very telling and true statement, that while we continue to have colonization in the Pacific, it continues to impede our vision. And this is a vision that has been recently expressed by the Prime Minister of Fiji of an ocean of peace, right? He's the latest to reinvigorate this concept. And this is a concept, the ocean of peace, which will be discussed at the Pacific Island Forum Leaders Summit in Honiara next month. And there's a lot of issues with this concept because we live in the most colonized area of the world. We are Pacific peoples. We have the largest number, the largest percentage of indigenous peoples as a percentage of national populations of any area in the world. We are basically indigenous states. We have this long cultural history. It ties into the history of Aboriginal Australia as well, that we want to manifest in our political independence going forward. But what we're finding is our sovereignty, our political independence we are undermined first and foremost by climate change. We are not in control of our future because the high emitting states, the historical emitters, have curtailed what can be in our future, because now we are facing a future of climate change that we did not cause. And that is why it is a climate justice issue, because we want to be self-determined and our people want to make decisions of how they live in their own lands, which we are now politically independent in. But our futures are curtailed by the ravages of climate change and what we're seeing, like slow onset and high intensity natural disasters like tropical cyclones and so on, are very much sending us in one direction where we cannot decide what we want to do with our future. It's the same with this geopolitical competition we're experiencing. We don't want to be a part of it, and yet it is something that is encroaching upon us. And it's unfortunate to see Australia, as we heard, being a part of this whole, I would say, distraction from the real needs of our people, our development. And we have in Vanuatu a vision for our future development, which we developed through this consultative process that we normally do with development of policy, as we're doing now with this festival next week. At the end of the festival, there will be an outcome statement that is presented to our Council of Ministers, our cabinet, for endorsement. This is what the cultural practitioners, the custodians of our culture, want to see this country go forward with. The previous vision that we are working on now is called the National Sustainable Development Plan. And it's basically has 3 pillars: economy, environment, and society. And the foundation of the 3 pillars is our culture. And so we see that as very important to determining our future. And militarization of the region has nothing to do with it. And unfortunately, climate change has everything to do with it. And this is why this ICJ decision I referred to earlier, which was handed down on the 23rd of July, the advisory opinion, is so important to us, because we've been in climate negotiations at the COPs for 30 years, getting pretty much nowhere. We have the UN Charter, the international community of nation states who are supposed to cooperate for the greater good of humanity. And we all know that it doesn't happen like that, that the more rich and powerful nations, the more militarized nations, try to determine the future for everybody. And what the ICJ advisory opinion was so crucial in saying was that, in fact, this international cooperation is a cooperation to assist and not infringe upon the self-determination of other countries. And if you do, committing an internationally wrongful act, and you are legally obligated to correct it. And so now we have, I suppose, a new tool in our kit, which we can go and negotiate with Australia. We can go negotiate at the COPs. We can start to push this. And I would like people, at this conference to look it up, because this is another thing you can use in trying to get governments to do what they should do in terms of addressing climate change. And particularly for Australia, getting off this fossil fuel pathway you're on, which is destroying our futures. And so I think I'll stop there. Thank you so much for having me participate. Thank you.
Thanks so very much, Ralph. That's an absolutely fabulous talk and follows on brilliantly from Mary's Fiji discussion. So I'm going to ask Winifred to reverse what she did before, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, and I've been told I have to stand closer to the microphone, so I hope everyone can hear now. Just yell out if you can't, everyone. Brisbane was often regarded as a bit of a backwater over the decades. And I remember when I was a kid and went to Sydney, people said, don't say that you're from Queensland, However, this city, Meganjin, actually has an amazing history of resistance. One of our earliest warriors of Indigenous resistance, Dundalli, some people know, was hung, murdered by the state around where Post Office Square is. And in the post-war era, we had great activists in Brisbane, such as Dennis Walker, who many people will remember, the great Sam Watson as well. And it is such a privilege today to welcome what we might say is, you know, continuing that genealogy of Indigenous activism in Brisbane. We are really privileged today to have Uncle Wayne, sometimes called Coco Wharton, and he's a vocal proponent of land rights, cultural preservation, reparations, including for the stolen generation and the dispossession of land. He's also been incredibly active in deaths in custody campaigns, and one of the great atrocities of this country is that number since the Royal Commission in the last couple of days passed 600. We've had 600 deaths in custody. We should really have remembered those people as well in our minute of silence. So I'll ask Uncle Wayne if he would come to the microphone, and we're going to hear him talk locally, but also he's been developing links and collaborations with activists in the Pacific. Thanks so much, Wayne.
I guess pretty close to where we're at. I'll try and get into it as quick as we can. And it's I've had some very great teachers in my time, and Uncle Don Brady, and Uncle. I came into the resistance as a 6-year-old kid back in the days of Opal, the One People of Australia League, and and my family is. The movement in Australia is made up of not organisations, but resistance families. Those families of the resistance. Dennis was born into it. His mother was born into it. Auntie Kath, Don Brady, Don Davison. So it's the movement in Australia. If you have to describe the movement in Australia, and the movement and the liberation movement is that made up of families of the resistance, not organisations. The first day of mourning was made up of 10 families that 1938 that got together in Sydney and decided to protest the bicentenary of the colony. People like Cooper, Reid, Patton, Ferguson, and their wives and their children. There was 10 families. So when you look at the foundation of the liberation of their resistance, it's always been those families, and it's been passed on in those families, and it's talked about at the dinner tables, and it's talked about at the family Sunday dinners, and it's you eat it, you drink it, and you debate it. So that's the narrative. So when we talk about today, I want to go through a couple of things just quickly. And to the brother that was just talking from Vanuatu, Penny Wong and the clown they took over to your place, Justin Muhammad, don't represent Aboriginal people. They don't. I saw publicity coming out of Vanuatu about Penny Wong and Justin Muhammad's visit. And, we look to our countries within the Pacific for liberation. And, it's something that, to quote the words of the Prime Minister of Fiji, on the New Caledonia situation in 2003, where 20 young fellas have been shot, his advice and his reluctance to go to visit Vanuatu on the invasion of 8,000 French troops was to not bite the hand that feeds you. So when we look at, and you can applaud and you can look at independence and the colonies within the Pacific, the observation by Rambuka is that you don't bite the hand that feeds you. And this, it typifies the control that the colonies have over those nations and within the Pacific. When we talk about the Pacific Forum, never has there been an Aboriginal person invited to sit and participate in any of those forums. Now, when we talk about, and the brother from Vanuatu just spoke about the colonies, he reluctantly and wouldn't mention Australia. Wouldn't mention Australia. If you have a look at the global situation and you interview someone from Burkina Faso, they won't mention or talk about Australia when they talk about colonisation. Somewhere along the line, Aboriginal people's rights to liberation, freedom and restitution has been deleted from the conversation. In Parliament, in the state government, in the schools, in the institutions. You know, one of our greatest chants that when we go to our marches is no justice, no peace. When we talk about the Palestinian boy throwing a rock at the IDF soldiers, and everyone applauds his courage. But when we talk about the group of Aboriginal kids in Alice Springs reacting to the racism and the poverty and the injustices, we condemn them as criminals. We develop legislation to put them in jail as 10-year-olds. These are when we talk about and we try to have the conversation, there seems to be one narrative for the rest of the world that undergoes occupation and a separate narrative for what we have domestically in Australia to talk about liberation and freedom and restitution. Until that changes, it's bullshit. Until it changes, we may as well forget about it. I grew up as a 10-year-old boy, and all I wanted to do was get a gun and shoot every white person I could find. Everyone. Everyone. That feeling that I had as a 10-year-old, it's still somewhere within me. It never goes away. That deep resentment, the deep-rooted injustice, it's still at times of utter despair that you just feel like getting a gun and shooting everybody. The resentment of the colonies is still a part of every Aboriginal person in this country, whether they admit it or not. How I dealt with that is my own, I guess, way of trying to reach some sort of position of justice for me and my family and my children and my grandchildren. But it's a reality. It's a reality. So a couple of things I want to get through today, just quickly, is, and I wanted to spend more time on the Kanaki situation. I just finished a conference with the resistance families in Kanaki, in New Caledonia on Tuesday night. What they're going through at the moment is a new accord that's being imposed upon them by the French government, and Macron's passed legislation. There's 3 different groups within there, and what they're going through is that they're teetering on a resurgence of action, military action against the French government and the French loyalists at the moment. The accord was signed by a group called the FLNKS, which is a colonial, which is a group that had a superficial representation of the Kanak people, but there's a very sincere dispute between the different factions within the Kanak people themselves, and the FLNKS no longer has the confidence of the people. So they're on the verge of civil disobedience, civil war within the colony itself. When we talk about the Pacific, and as the brother from Vanuatu had said just before, is that, and the Prime Minister of Fiji, is that you don't bite the hand that feeds you. And this is the reality for many of those countries. Many of those families, when we take it for granted that the Catholic Church, the Uniting Church, the Red Cross, Save the Children Fund, Doctors Without Borders, they are controlled in these colonies by loyalists. It's not the same as walking into St. Vincent de Paul's here. It's not the same as walking into the Red Cross. They don't get any assistance. These organisations that are supposed to be helping these people are controlled by biased loyalists that support the colonisation and deprivation of liberty for many of these people. Right from the wharfs to the hospitals. Many of the nursing staff, many of the doctors are flat out racist. So when we talk about these things, they're real world. And if any of these families or any of these individuals dare to speak up in these communities, they're the first ones that are punished. Just in Kanaki alone, the first actions in the 2023 on the 13th of May was 2,000 people being locked up in the domestic jail, was 40 people being deported to the French jail, 500 people going missing, 8,000 troops being sent in. So any one of those families that dared to speak up were taken, the leaders were actually put in chains and taken to France. 8 of them have just been released at the moment in France, and they're walking around the streets of France because they weren't flown home. Their supports are very minimal. The leader of the FLNKS is still in home detention in France. Meanwhile, this accord has been signed in Noumea without his presence. So when we talk about an understanding that what's the reality for many of the people within, whether it's West Papua, whether it's Inala here in Brisbane, or Colomulla in Queensland, or Sydney, the reality is quite different. When we talk about what is going on, the basic medical supplies, the basic access to doctors, the basic access to schools doesn't exist in Noumea. Doesn't exist. I speak with, and the identity of the people that we talk to, the people that is very draconian and is played out with the guns. That's the reality. Right now, we've got some young people, a couple of teachers that are wanting to go to Noumea in the near future. We've had to pull them back because we don't know what's going to happen in the next week or so. The ABC has been pulled out of there. The CIA pulled out their version of the correspondence in the Pacific. That was one of Trump's first thing, was to silence the Pacific and make sure that there was no broadcast, no information, no journalism coming out of no proper information. We set up, when I say we, Woomera, who represents most of the nations, the liberation nations around Australia, we set up a group called RATA, which is a media body. And we're looking for people that are writers, people that are going to contribute to that, to amplify the stories that come out of there. The ABC, we camped outside the ABC for 2 months ago for a week because the ABC had cut its Pacific broadcasting arm. So when we talk about and where we go with it, this time in our lives, it's a point of mobilisation. And as brother said before, it's about mobilisation and how we do it. What we're seeing played out in Gaza and in the Congo and in West Papua and many of the colonised people that forget about Hawaii once their liberation. You know, Bora Bora wants their liberation. You've got America is the greatest terrorist in the last 100 years and the biggest imperialist colonizer of the world. What we have to see and what has to play out is that no one can be judged for the crimes or what your grandparents did or your great-grandparents did. But those systems that are still in place now and that reward and maintain the privilege, they are the systems that have to be pulled down. How we pull them down is not that difficult. One of the things that we have to dispel is the myth that two-party preferred have got a right to exist. They are a parasitic system that bludgeon and bludge and create a situation where their recipients of their governance are actually the people that reward themselves financially. Whether it's the war company, whether it's the mining company, or whether it's Elon Musk paying 300 million to own a government. The system, the two-party preferred system are the systems that have to be taken down. Whether it's through more elections of independence, whether it's more parties, but it has to be done at a local level, local government level, it has to be done at a state government level, and it has to be done at the UN. Right now, what we're seeing played out at the United Nations is nothing short of prostitution. Nothing short. Both Israel and America have maintained its veto and maintained its position of operating with outside the UN, and they propose and they purport a movement of racial based on a global racism agenda. Have a look at it. Have a look at everything that they do. It's outside the UN. When we talk about where Aboriginal people go in this country, we talk about sovereignty. Everyone talks about sovereignty. The federal court in the Mabo decision recognised our sovereignty. What we intend to do as nations in this country, and what we look for support to do, is to apply to the UN for our statehood. Each one of our nations that exist in this country have the right to be a state within the UN. Decolonisation in the Pacific starts with Australia. Starts with Australia. If you're not fair dinkum about it, you're an accomplice in the imprisonment and the deprivation of our liberty. Liberty is a funny word, but it's a very simple word. It talks about freedom. Where in the history, in the 250 years of colonisation as Aboriginal people, became citizens of the colony, and be handed over their right to freedom. If we're having discussions and we're having talks and we're having yarning circles, if you're not talking about liberation, freedom and restitution, you're bullshitting yourselves. We're bullshitting ourselves. And the two-party preferred system works on one principle. Well, there are actually two. Defer two actions. Defer and distract. Defer and distract and maintain control. We saw this and we see it played out, particularly with this Labor government that's got a massive, they will throw, in the next 3 years, they will throw billions of dollars superficially addressing what they call close the gap. They will throw millions of dollars at it. And the average Australian will presume that they're doing the right thing because their government's throwing millions of dollars at it. That money and where it goes to is equivalent to pissing in the wind. Useless, nowhere. And what we allow, you allow as voters, is this situation to exist. Years ago, 20 years ago, no one would call out the pedophile priest. No one would call out the pedophile school teacher or the policeman. The challenge is for most Australians is that you've got to pick out which blackfella's telling the truth and which one's just trying to make money out of the colony. And the colony will always pick the blackfella that they want to listen and that will sing their song. It's basic. But I believe what's coming out of Gaza, what's coming out of the rest of the world, what's coming out of Kanaki is that the world is changing. And I believe that Australia has a real role in the world. We've only got 24 million people. So to pull down those systems isn't as difficult as it is in Great Britain or in America. I think the courage and the daring that should be played out in the halls of Parliament and in the classrooms. We've already seen the failures of our institutions, the universities. We've seen how gutless they are. We've seen the vice chancellors. They're run by Santos. They're run by BHP. And this is what has to be stopped. So it's with groups like this that you can actually get together and change things. And I'll just get ready to close. But what people say, well, where do we go from here? Well, as Australians, we should be looking at a 301 state solution. There's 400 states or 300 states that exist in this country. In our law, those states, we occupied this country under our law, under Woomera law, and it was a law about responsibility and coexistence. We stayed here for 500 years, 1,000 years, or it might have been 3,000 or 60,000 years. But the principle is that society existed, that our United Nations existed, that there was 400 nations that are here. You guys come along, your ancestors come along, we just make room for another state. 401 state or 301 state. And unless the discussions are held from that perspective, we're not going to get anywhere. This thing they call the gap started in 1897. Well, it started with the invasion. It started with the war that took place. And that the war, when it went from being a war to the first colonial laws that were created, which was in 1897 in Victoria and 1887 in Queensland. And they were the Aboriginal Protection Acts. They take the time to go and get a copy of them, read them. It will tell you everything that was denied to Aboriginal people. One of the key things that was denied to Aboriginal people was the right to participate in the economic development of the country. That was the creation of Boundary Street, the creation of the concentration camps, Cherbourg, Warrabinda, Palm Island. 2, 3, 4 generations of our people, poverty was used by the colony as a form of genocide. To keep us poor, to keep us economically deficient and on the verge of the colony. That's the gap. How you come over with that gap, there's only one way you can abolish that gap, and that's restitution. And if you put a figure on it, it's 1 million per blackfella per year. You have no more Centrelink. You have no more kids in detention centres. The jail population will be massively reduced. You have no Aboriginal people on welfare. No one in the line for the Housing Commission. No one making themselves fat like Noel Pearson, or $30 million of personal wealth made out of welfare management. And this is the reality. If we're going to talk about the reality, the answer to abolishing the gap is restitution. And what that actually does is creates more benefit for communities like Alice Springs or Inala or Palm Island. You actually inject more money back into the economy. But there's other people that are better qualified that can relate to that. But closing the gap, abolishing the gap can only be done through restitution. Otherwise, all we're doing is perpetuating a situation where those people that prosper out of persecution and what the colony does will continue to maintain that. But Australia has a real opportunity. We have a real opportunity to go forward. Independence is something that being a republic is something that I think we all should look at. And how we go with that republic is a 401 state proposal. Whether we look at the Senate as being an Aboriginal representation process and the House of Reps as being the broader population's representation is one model, but there's many other models. But when we see the insecurity of the United Nations, I think we as 24 million people that have an interest in this colony should start talking about those how we fit into the rest of the world and where the rest of the world fits in with us. And like I said, take a moment. If we're talking about freedom, let's start with what's happening in the Middle East with Gaza, but let's look closer to home as what's happening in West Papua, and what's more closer, what is happening in New Caledonia. Those people, like I said, I talk to the mothers, I talk to many of the community people that remain anonymous every Tuesday night. And this stuff comes straight from them, and they're looking, they are simple things like flu tablets, nappies, baby formula, the things that we take for granted. These people are I was very fortunate. I'll just, 1 minute. Sorry. I got to, when no one was going into New Caledonia, no one would go in there. None of the Rambuka wouldn't go in. The Vanuatu government wouldn't go in. No one would go into, at the height of martial law, no one would go in. Myself and an interpreter, a young girl from Melbourne, and another young man, we went in. We flew in. And the security people, the immigration people said, well, what are you doing here? You know, this is martial law. And one of the ladies, our host, said he's getting married. And So I was able to get in under that,
Where's your bride?
still over there. Didn't work out, didn't work out. Oh, I think it's all going, but we didn't get there. But the point was that we were able to get in there. I took 30 Aboriginal flags in. The French, there was 8,000 troops going around. 20 people had just been shot, killed. 500 was still missing. That I visited every post, every place around there, and I flew the Aboriginal flag off every post, and they flew all their flags. So when the French troops got up the next day, there was all these fortresses and blockades with an Aboriginal flag on them. And what it actually did is that the flag was an official flag of the Australian government. So it created a mass international question where you had, you know, this, why is the official flag of Australia being flying on French territory against the French government? So it was a way of, well, I spent 4 days in there, I got out, we're back, but like I said, they need a lot of help, but so do we, Aboriginal people. And I just want to, last thing is that, look up a bloke called Justin Muhammad. Albanese appointed him as an Aboriginal ambassador to the Australian government. Put him on a budget of 500,000 plus travel, plus his own office. Now, this is what we're saying. The Australian public has to decide which blackfella's telling the truth and which one is not. And yeah, we plead. I'm very lucky. I run a demolition and constructions company, but I ran my first newspaper sales when I was 10 years old. So I've always known how to hunt and support myself, and being able to say what I want, when I want, and go where I want. But unfortunately, a lot of our people depend on the colony to survive, and that dictates the narrative. But we're hoping that this being 2025, that it starts with a place like Brisbane, and we start supporting people that are talking the truth. The first thing that disappeared with the Christodoulou government was the commitment to the treaty and the commitment to truth telling. But our liberation comes from the population, and our liberation comes from the truth telling. And, you know, like I said, we're NGO, non-government, and there's a couple of, you go to treaty before sport, and one of the things we're pushing internationally is the boycotting of the Olympics in America in 2028. And we're also boycotting the Olympics here in 2032. That solidarity is a big thing. And it's something that we can get there. These things are achievable in our lifetime. Like I said, I grew up, I'm 64 years old. I grew up on a camp. I didn't meet my first white person until I was 6 years old. But there's a lot of mistruths. There's a lot of false narratives that go around. And shamefully, a lot of our people are involved in that because it keeps them out of the concentration camps, and it's money to them. You know, people like Noel Pearson can make $30 million out of personal wealth for managing welfare. It shouldn't happen. It shouldn't happen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wayne. And that power and that passion shows why Wayne is a leader of the Indigenous activist community in Brisbane. And we very much take the point that peace starts with justice for Indigenous people in Australia. I can't reiterate that enough. And I'm just going to tell a very brief anecdote about the insidious ubiquity of colonialism. Some time ago, I edited a journal on women and work, or a special edition of a journal, and a contributor came from Hyderabad University. Her name was Rekha Pandey, and part of her article, she was looking at child labour in India. It was impossible to collect the stats because the stats system in India is based on what was introduced during the Raj, and to try and intervene into that and collapse that, she had found almost impossible. So it's a very small story and doesn't in any way detract from what Wayne has told us. But it did really drive home to me, what the hell is this whole colonialism, imperialism? It's something that actually eats into the very fabric of who we are. And we need to be able to step back and have that re-examined. So I'm actually going to take a unilateral decision with absolutely no consultation with anyone. We've gone a little bit over time and we have another panel coming after us. So I know that our 3 speakers in this panel, unfortunately, I don't think Ralph
Wasn't able to stay.
yes, well, good. I don't mean good. That's not what I mean. But I mean, that means I don't need to worry about that. Our other 2 speakers, Mary's here, Wayne's here, and I'm absolutely certain that they will take questions and discussions with people during the break. So I think that we might move directly on to the next panel. Thank you so much to our speakers, and thanks for being a great audience. Thanks, everyone.